we're going to hear from a couple of really good dads that are from different generations that are going to give their advice to you. So you don't have to stand up, but what I'd love you to do is put your hands together as John Pop comes up and Lee Ianson comes and joins me on the platform here. And these two guys have been handpicked by Sam and the team to give their expert advice. And I've already had a little bit of a chat to these guys, and I know that what God is going to say through them and to us, it really will help you make good parenting decisions, and especially from our dads today. So for our dads, John, I might just start with you, John, because I just want to get right into it today. And here's my first thought that I want you guys to comment on. If you could have your time again, or if you could reparent another lot of kids, not saying you have to do that because you've done your job, what is one of the things you would change when you were raising children in this world? What's one of the things that you would change?
Okay, a little bit complicated. Different era that I came from, and my children grew up in. But what I would change mostly would be my time with my children.
Yeah.
And rather than like the job I had, I travelled an awful lot, both nationally and internationally. 1 year I was away on average 1 day in 5 over the whole year.
Wow.
And so an awful lot fell back on my wife, and it took me a fair while to understand that and appreciate what issues she was dealing with, and it's not easy when there's a dad there and he's not there. So anyway, after a period of time, I sort of woke up what was going on, and I just said to the boss, look, I just can't do this anymore, and I quit my job.
Wow.
It was a really well-paid job, company vehicle, fully expensed. Anyway, I'd been doing it for a little while. So I was out of work for 6 weeks, but in that period of time, because the children were only pretty small, and the whole school was going on an excursion down to Taronga Zoo, and so I volunteered to be a parent assistant or whatever you want to call them these days, I don't know.
Helping the teacher take all of the kids to the zoo.
Yeah, that's it. Anyway, I think I was the only dad there, but I had a great day, and the kids just gathered around me the whole time. And it was it did something to my heart.
Yeah.
And I realised I've missed out on an awful lot, even though they might have only been 6 or 7, but I'd still missed out on an awful lot, and I needed to catch up. So my advice to anyone having children today would be spend time. Spend as much time as you possibly can, and be united with your wife so that you parent together. Yeah, you don't go separate ways.
Yeah, it's very good. So in short, to be a good dad, quit your job and go to the zoo. Is that the takeaway? Or there's got to be, how did you end up balancing between being away so much and then quitting your job and going to the zoo? Do you have any thoughts on how you eventually balanced it? Because, what you've said so far, tick, we could all go home right now, we all quit, we all go to the zoo. But is there any advice on how you balanced it after that? Like, were we just more aware of it, or?
I became more aware of it. Unfortunately, when I did go back to work, it all started up again. And but anyway, we managed to get through it.
So just being more aware that...
More aware and being together, mum and dad being together, making or agreeing on a decision that was made that affected the children, rather than, I sometimes see a child will go to one parent and ask a question and then go to the other parent to get the right answer that they're looking for. But I think parents just have to be in unison and agree what they're going to do. And
That's good wisdom. I know that when we were chatting before, Lee, you really spoke up about how the parenting thing works together. I mean, if memory serves me well, which it doesn't all the time, so correct me if I'm wrong. But I know that when I was chatting to you and I asked you about the number one thing, you said it was to do with what John said about parenting together. Do you want to unpack that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, I just think it's such an important thing that God brings us together as a family unit, as a couple. And I know that that's not always possible in every situation, and I understand that. But it just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah.
Like when you can rely on someone else, on another parent who can, step up for you when you might need it, or just know that God's put you together for that reason, to parent these amazing kids and bring them up in the ways that He wants them brought up in. I saw this good video a few weeks ago, which basically said it was this couple, and they were mentioning how they would sit down at the end of a day on many days and talk about how much percentage they're on. I think it's Brené Brown and her husband. And I just thought that was such a great analogy of, the husband might come home and say, "Oh, look, I'm at 30% max. Can you pick up the other 20?"
Okay.
And likewise, the wife might come home from a busy day and say, "I'm at literally 10%. I need you to do 90 today." And obviously not abusing that, and not, but being able to communicate easily and communicate effectively. That's something that Claire and I have been talking with the kids about, even just today, about communication, communicating effectively, and being able to verbalise and talk to your family about what you need. And I think sometimes we don't do that real well as adults. Yeah. We don't show that to our kids, and we don't do it real well between husband and wife. And I think that's a huge thing, because I know if Claire comes home and says, "I need you to pick up an extra 20%, I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Yeah. And that way we know, and that way we're not, getting frustrated and saying, "Oh, but they haven't done this," and then it's just in your mind and it eats away at you, and and the kids pick up on those things, and the kids will benefit from you being able to communicate effectively and being able to come home and do all the amazing things we do at home, which oftentimes we don't think are amazing, but they are amazing. Yeah. Wrestling with my kids today was, one of them's got a broken arm, so that
which you caused?
Well,
wrestling?
My work caused it, yeah. Monkey bars, but and just that time that you get together with your kids, like John was saying, time is such a huge thing, and it goes so quickly. Like, I moved up here 7 years ago, and that's just insane to think that was 7 years ago, and all the amazing things God's done since then. But it means my kids are now not 3 and 1. Yeah. They're 10 and 8. Yeah. And I've got a daughter who looks like she's 14, which scares the living daylights out of me. But anyway, yeah.
I like what you said about the percentage thing, like, because everyone says, okay, if there's a mum and a dad, or there's two people raising the children, it's a 50-50 split. But you're talking about, yes, we have 50-50, but some days you come home and dump an extra 20 on your wife, so she's got 70 and you're 30. Is that what you're saying? But you're letting them know that I've had a busy day and I know we're 50-50, but you've got to take an extra 30 because I'm only doing 20 tonight. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I mean it in a reasonable way.
I wasn't going to abuse it. I was just clarifying for my friends.
I mean, if you want to do it all the time, you could put it in the vows if you want. I'll give 5% and you give 95. I don't think that would work.
Well, look, I know it's true. I mean, the last couple of days, obviously, I've had my grandkids over. Sam and Kirsty's young too, as she's in there giving birth and doing what she's doing with Rocky. Which, by the way, Sam and Kirsty have had their third child, which is why they're not here. But let's not get business involved with this. Because I'm sure that Sheree will mention more about that later on. But I've come home and I've been working the last couple of days, and Sheree's had the grandkids 100% of the time. And she's a different person when she's had grandkids all day compared to what she's... She's a better person when she's had the grandkids all day than when she's by herself. No, I can't say that right, no matter which way we go. But I know what you're saying. And she often says, hey, I'm at home, I'm looking after the kids, help me put them in the car, which is probably 2% of what's happening for the day. But I think it's a really good point that when you've got two people parenting, ask the other person for help when needed, and do the job together. Like it's whatever the percentages are on whatever given day, together we're always better. And I think that's what you've pulled out, which is amazing. So let me just flip onto that. I mean, we've talked about what we would change, spending more time parenting together, some great keys there. One of the other things that a lot of people ask is they say, well, if you're raising kids, how do you keep them in the church? Or forget that question. How do you keep them centered around God? How do you bring a godly influence to your children so that they grow up loving God, serving God? Obviously, church is a part of that. But I don't want to make it all just about, well, how do you get them to church? Because obviously you can force people to come to church. But how do you keep kids walking with God long term as you're raising them? John, you got me an answer for that one?
Yeah, it can be quite tricky. I understand that, and we've been through that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the way you live, and if you're showing your heart towards God at all times, you're actually being a role model to your children. So, like in my church life, shouldn't say that, in my Christian life,
Yeah.
I've been in church now for 55 years.
Wow.
And I have done everything except be up on the stage.
Tick.
Right.
Got that one done today?
So you name it, I've been in two or three churches. So yeah, everything else I've done, and I've always been available. I would work. One job I had, it was an hour and a half from home. So hour and a half drive, 8 hours work, hour and a half back, go straight to the church, be doing things there, fixing things up and whatever else needed doing. And I think that role model, well, I'm hoping that role model of showing where my love is, where my number one priority is, apart from my family, is God and His house.
Yeah.
And the children hopefully pick up on that. Yeah.
Well, I know one of them certainly did, because she's pretty well served God pretty well all her adult life, like full time.
They're both doing good.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing you say is that your kids are going to more do what you do than what you say.
Exactly.
So you can talk about God as much as you want, or read the Bible to them, or force them to come to church. But at the end of the day, as they're growing old and they get to that age where they can do what they want, or they turn 16, then 18, then 21, and then married and on their way with their own lives, what you role modelled is far more important than what you've ever said.
Yeah.
I like it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. Lee, what can you add to that in helping kids stay godly and walking with God?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what John said. Like, just have a servant heart towards God's house. Like, make it a place, make it a priority, like John said. Make it a place that you come to and you give not just your finances, but you give of yourself. Yeah. God's called us all to be servants, and God's called us all to come into His house and build His kingdom first.
How do you get your kids involved in serving? Like, you can role model that.
Yep.
But any ideas on what your kids can do as part of that?
Well, I mean, like with our kids, we bring them along to the extra things. So when we're doing a family service, obviously, or a family event, they're coming along with us. They're often coming with Claire, an hour or 2 hours early to help just do everything. You bring them in and you make them a part of the place without making it sound like you're forcing them to go. I mean, at this point in their lives...
without sounding like...
Yeah. At this point in their lives, they can't be at home on their own, so they basically have no choice. Yeah. But hopefully we're giving them that positivity and that it's also about how you speak about the church as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going home and you're saying things about others, if you're not working through the things that happen on the inside, we need to work through with God. We don't work through that with our kids.
Yeah,
That's not what we do.
Very good, very good.
We work through it with God, and then we speak positively about God's house. You don't build something by tearing parts of it down. So, it's the way you speak, it's the way you model it, like John said. I'm kind of blessed in that I have a daughter who can kind of sing pretty well. And so she was just up here as soon as, she was about 8 years old, and she started singing on stage. And I didn't want to tell her, no, you got to wait, until you're this age or whatever. The Word of God says, bring the children, and so, she was off key at times. I'm off key at times. It's just, and so getting her up here, and particularly when she started singing and I was on stage at the same time, it was such a amazing experience for me. I know, I was just thinking about it the other day. My pa passed away 2 years ago. He was 94, and he used to play organ in the Methodist church. And I grew up as a little kid going to this Methodist church, which I thought was a little bit traditional, of course, compared to Pentecostal churches that I grew up in. But I remember going every Christmas and watching him play the organ and watching him serve at church. And then my mum, from when I was a little kid, would play piano in church. She was a piano teacher, still is, and still plays in church. And to see my pa, my mum, myself, and then my daughter, it's such a legacy that he's left, and he's in heaven now. But I mentioned it at his funeral. I mentioned about what he passed on to us, and he was never griping about it. He was never negative about having to come in and play. He was always willing to play and serve. And I think, modelling it, like John said, is such a huge thing. Yeah. And making sure that we're speaking really well of the church and really well. That doesn't mean that things never go wrong. It just means we deal with it the right way.
Right way, yeah. No, it's very, very good. I mean, it seems to me that it's coming through pretty clear today that a good dad, and there's more to it than that, but a good dad that's coming from today is, number one, spend time with your kids, be there for them, co-parent them. So with your wife, a good dad always has a good mum behind them. And the other thing is that what you're saying is role model it. You've got to role model it. And like you say, with your grandfather and your nan playing music, you're playing music, and now your daughter's up here singing. It's not that they copy what you do, but role modelling has more power than people think. When you were saying that, I was just thinking about John, because John served in the church, Cherie served in the church, and now who runs this church now? Sam. So directly from John and Lynn has come down to Cherie, and then now Sam's doing this. And this is not the sort of job you just sort of pick out of a book. I wonder what career. It's almost like, you've got to be called to do it. But I just wonder whether the calling of God is often dovetailed into what the parents have role modelled. Yeah. And if parents are bad, sometimes kids are bad. If parents are good, then most of the time, the kids are good. John, I just got one other question for you, and it's not really a question. It's more of a comment. I know when I was chatting to you the other day, you talked about one of the things that you would do if you could raise your kids again, is that you would have more say, or maybe a little bit more disciplined, more influence in who your kids were friends with. Can you unpack that a little bit more? I know there's 3 different generations up here, but I loved what you said. I have no idea how you enforce that, but run your ideas out for us.
You need to be, you're looking after your children all the time. It doesn't stop when they go to bed or when they're not at home or whatever. Yeah. And you always take an interest in who they are making friends with. And you need to, as a parent, assess that friend, and if it's not to your standard or the standard you want in your home, then you need to talk to your child about that and be quite open about it. Not just bullying sort of thing and say, no, you can't have that as a friend now. No, just be reasonable and explain things. Children are not stupid. They understand. They're smart people right from when they're born. You know, God has put that in us. And we need to treat them as if they are, that they are, very smart, very clever, and they can work things out for themselves. And if you're reasonable in the way that you meter their friends, then you'll be successful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, when I've ever taught on raising kids, I always talk about changing gears. You know, there's the under 13s you do because I said so. Then there's 13 to 18, the teenage years, which are normally the toughest years. And I always say the gear that you've got to change between do this because I'm your mum and dad and I said so, but in the teenage years, you can still say do this because I said so, but you must sit down and give the reason why you've made that decision. And even though kids, you know, they may buck against that, they may be upset that, you know, you've said no to that friend or no to that party or no whatever it might be, you know, at least they've heard why you've said no. And when they get older, they will remember those reasons and probably pass them on to their own kids and laugh about it, you know, down the track. But it's hard to do at the time when they're bucking the trend. And I know that Cherie, when our kids, I call it gear 3, when they're up over 18 and they're pretty well doing what they want, Cherie would, you know, we would say, no, we don't think you should go to that party because of whatever reason, but we would never stop them because it's not no because I said so. It's we don't recommend it, this is why, but if you choose to go, we're there for you. And I know Cherie, once our kids were over 18, if they ever went to a party and we said no, but they still said, I'm going anyway, Cherie would still go and pick them up, make sure they got home safely, not allow some other random to drive them home that could have drunk or, you know, drunk too much or whatever on their P's, still responsible but on a different level. And between, you know, probably where your kids are at, no because I said so, and then my kids rising up and it's no, and this is why I don't think you should do it, to no, but I'm going to support and love you anyway, I think that heavily dovetails in with the friends. So that's good. Any last words? Because
I'm pretty much done, I think.
Lee?
If you go to the guitar shop and leave your kids at home when they're 9 and 7, just make sure your wife doesn't come home before you get home. It's not real happy.
Do you want
Jan?
to unpack what you learnt from that situation?
I learnt that having an iPad on FaceTime is probably not good enough with a 9-year-old. I mean, she didn't climb in the oven or anything. Like,
so you left your child at home that was 9 under the supervision of...
I looked it up on the internet.
...of the iPad, thinking you'd get home from the music shop before Claire.
Yeah.
And she got home before
she
you.
She did, yeah.
So how do you operate as a single parent?
Not well. Not well. I checked the Docs website first. They have a website and it said how old and to... Yeah, anyway. If I keep talking, I'll probably get in more trouble. So.
I don't want to prolong this, but how old can you leave your kid at home with an iPad? According to Docs.
I think it said 45 minutes.
45 minutes? What age?
Oh, like 9, I think. But if you had 5 kids, you know more than me.
It sounds like you're twisting that to fit into your story. Well, hey, guys, I hope you learned something out of that. These guys have shared their heart. There's some great gems in there. So let's give a round of applause. Let's get our band back up because we've got stacks of stuff that's happening today.